In British Columbia, people protesting old-growth logging have been calling for change in forestry management. Earlier this fall, the Esdilagh First Nation in northern BC made a declaration calling for consent before logging in their lands continued. The BC government agrees and say they want a paradigm shift in their old-growth strategy. Nathan Cullen, the Minister of Land and Natural Resources, says the tools for managing forest were handed to forest companies decades ago.
Much of the direction and authority had been given away to licensees, to large forestry companies. And over the last 20 years, we've really seen the results, that we've lost about 30,000 jobs. We've lost dozens and dozens of mills. We see more and more investment in forestry from BC companies, but not here in BC.
Last week, BC introduced Bill 23, which would make changes to Forest and Range Practices Act that would revamp forest management in the province. It would shift decision-making power from industry back to communities and First Nations. Minister Cullen says if this bill passes, the tools for old-growth management and deferrals can be put in place.
What we're doing is we're working with Indigenous governments around BC, because that was the first recommendation, if you'll remember, from the old growth panel, was to make sure that we were engaging respectfully with the rights and title holders, not just running around with a map and a marker and saying, this is what's not going to be logged, this is what's going to be logged. Those are days past.
The Esdilagh First Nation, located near Quesnel, sees the bill as a positive change. According to the nation's Chief Troy Baptiste, the previous policy and stewardship plan left little to no room for Indigenous input.
We had nothing to do with it before, so this is all new to us, and it's a learning process we're going through.
Chief Baptiste thinks improvements to the Forestry Act are a step in the right direction. The nation's been recently included in the landscape planning process with the province. He says traditional knowledge and modern forestry practices can come together for a healthy land for future generations.
First Nations, as well as other stakeholders, have valuable input on what interests they would like represented and how that process will look. This allows for forest landscape management that will improve the overall health and resiliency of the forest ecosystems and help to reduce the risk to biodiversity.
Minister Cullen believes conflicts seen in the last 10 to 20 years in BC could have been prevented by having Indigenous communities be partners.
Bringing people into the process very early on, respecting rights and title of First Nations and our obligations there, will make for much better plans over the entire territory and landscape. That's what we're doing as a government. That's just our values being expressed, and that's what we ran on the last election. So that's why you're seeing these things come up.
The bill is now in the legislation process, and Cullen estimates they are weeks away from getting it passed. Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Kitimat.